All right, everyone, so we're back on the CRV, and I had something happen this weekend that I actually had told a story about. One of my first videos I told a story about. I was working at a Ford dealer, and we had a Explorer that had an ABS issue, and long story short, it ended up being something that had already been replaced, and it caused another problem that was similar to the original problem, so we went round and round and round, and then after thousands of dollars and man hours and all this stuff, we realized that it was just all caused to a faulty part. So I had a similar issue happen with the CRV. I want to talk about it, give you a little insight on how it happened, why it happened, what I did to figure it out, but what I could have done to maybe avoid that issue altogether. So I had picked up the CRV, and part of the safety check I'm doing on it was obviously I noticed it had an ABS light on, traction control light, vehicle stability light, all three were on. So I went into the computer, and it had ABS fault codes for the right front ABS sensor, short or open circuit. So I'm like, okay, it's leading me towards the right front ABS sensor. I'll take it for a ride. I took it for a ride with the scanner. I got data coming out of the left front, the right rear, the left rear, but nothing out of the right front. So, okay, needs an ABS sensor. I felt decently confident with that. I've replaced a lot of ABS sensors on Hondas and Acuras. I felt very confident that that was gonna repair the issue. Now, I did not do any further diagnosis, and that was my first mistake. I should have owned the left front sensor that was good, and I should have owned the right front that was showing bad, and just, seen, is it an open, is it got a lot of resistance, no resistance, whatever the case. But I skipped that step. Let's pop in this sensor. Now, these sensors, to show you what they look like, typical Honda sensor of this era, I should say. That is the end that goes into the spindle, drops in. There's a 10mm bolt that holds it in place. This part of the sensor right here goes and reads against a magnetic toner ring that's attached to the bearing. So typically these do not come out. I'm in the Northeast, and I've learned a very good trick on getting these out. I'm going to share that with you, a little tip. So you take the bolt out and you go to slide out this sensor, and what happens? Usually this end breaks off and it leaves the rest of that shank inside the spindle, right? Actually, let me see if I can bring you over, show you a little bit better. All right, there's the hole right there, and then the larger hole is where the sensor slides into, the smaller hole is where the bolt goes. That's how the sensor looks when it's installed. And what happens is you get the bolt out, you go to remove the sensor, and the end snaps off. Driver in a pick, and you could try to, after you take the bolt out, pry against that flat and try to slide it out. Most times it's not gonna come out. If you get them out, hey, you're lucky, but most times they won't come out. So what I've learned to do is I've seen guys, they'll take off the whole spindle and get access where they can, drill it out, not damage the face of the bearing where the toner is. What I found is that if you take off the axle nut and the axle can slide back, you take the axle nut off, you slide the axle back, that gives you access to this part. You'll see, like, I don't know, that much of it sticking out. If you go to the spindle with a little MAP gas torch, I have these little yellow MAP gas torches when I don't feel like using the big oxyacetylene torch, and if you heat around where the spindle is, it'll melt this, and once it melts, you could push it right out. So there's a little tip on how to get these sensors out where you don't have to take the whole knuckle off and drill the sensor out and all that stuff, save you a lot of time. So anyway, I never owned the original sensor, but I had a code for it, short and open. I was not getting any signal out of it. I looked inside where the bearing was. The toner ring was there. It didn't have, like some guys have run into where people have done wheel bearings on these and they press in the wrong end and the toner's facing on the outside instead of the inside. It wasn't anything like that. So I said, okay, needs a sensor. Melt it, boom, get it out, clean out all the rust inside where the sensor goes. I slide the new sensor in, put it all back together, go to take it down the road. Now, really all the lights should auto clear. every once in a while I'll get a car where I'll do an ABS sensor and I'll see that it wasn't reading, and now I replaced it and I see it's reading, and sometimes the lights will still be on. You can go in the ABS system and clear the codes, but most times they'll like auto clear where, okay, the computer, the ABS module picks up that it's getting the signal it wasn't getting before, and it'll say, okay, we're good now. Drive it, light is still on. All right, well, I missed something. So I bring it back in, scan it, same thing, right front sensor, you know, open short. So I'm like, all right, great. I misdiagnosed it. I jumped the gun. I skipped out ohming the sensor. Now I've destroyed the sensor, so I can't ohm the sensor. So at this point, it's getting towards later in the afternoon. I had a family gathering going on that it was touchy whether I'd be able to make it to or not. So I shut the shop down, cleaned up, and I took off. So I come in on Sunday, and now I'm determined. I guess I got to figure this out. So initially I assume, okay, well, this is a new ABS sensor. It's probably good. But you know what? I learned my lesson from years ago. I own this sensor. And I get like 0.738 for an ohm reading. And I'm like, that's weird. I would think 5 ohms resistance, something like that, you know, is a spec 5 ohm, 4 ohm, something like that. So I go to the left front, which I know is good because it's working, it's not setting codes. I own that sensor, 3.5 ohms, on the dot, good. I'm like, all right, well, this is ohming odd. Maybe the new sensor is bad. Maybe it's not, but I'm thinking I don't like the fact that the sensor that's working good is one range and the sensor that's not working good is another range, and they're totally, you know, couldn't be farther apart. So then I said, well, let me make sure I don't have a broken wire. I don't have anything going on that I'm not realizing. Maybe there's some corrosion in one of the connectors at the ABS module. Maybe I just missed it. So I go to the ABS module, I unplug the main harness, I look up the wiring diagram, I check the wires, and it's luckily that the ABS pump is right on this side. It's right above, so the wires, you can see the main harness going to the pump. You see the little pigtail coming right out that goes to the right front sensor. Short harness, I ohm it, good continuity. There's no corrosion. There's no corrosion in the connector going to the pump. All right, it's got to be a bad sensor, right? But of course, it's Sunday, I can't get a sensor, and I want to prove, like, I'm at the point now where I want to prove that it's a bad sensor. So I said, well, the only thing I could try to do is I could try to pull the sensor out of the left side and switch it to the right side and see what happens. Now, let's say I switched it and it doesn't follow the sensor. If I switch the left front sensor that I know is good to the right side and the problem still stays on the right, then obviously it's not a sensor. It's either A, the pump, or maybe there is something wrong with the wiring, even though it had good continuity, but it just means that the problem is not going to be this. Now, I was reluctant to do that because, like I said, getting these sensors out, 9 times out of 10 you break them. But when I went over to the left side, I noticed that the sensor is a Honda sensor, but it looked fairly clean, like maybe it had been done within the last year or two. So took the bolt out, sprayed a little PB blaster, grabbed the long nose pair of needle nose pliers, and I just start moving it, and came right out perfect. Couldn't ask for anything better. I was very happy with that. So I go through the trouble, switch it over, I run it on the car. Sure enough, with the left side sensor on the right side now, I'm getting a reading. It's reading the speed. I hook up this brand new sensor to the left side. Now it's not reading. Now it's setting a short open circuit for this on the left side. I switch them back. Problem goes right back to the right. So I proved without any kind of a reasonable doubt that this brand new $100, well, my cost, yeah, close to $100 sensor, no good, garbage, crap, throw it away, got to get a new one. Now, like I said, I figured it out, and I was right on my diagnosis. I feel that I was right on my diagnosis in the beginning, but because I didn't own the original sensor that was in there, and I kind of like leapfrogged a little bit through the steps, I kind of screwed myself with it. I could have done just a couple other little checks, you know. I mean, technically, I could have owned that factory sensor, seen what that was. Then I would have known in my heart, okay, that sensor isn't open, it's no good. And then I could have even done where I removed the right side because it's going to get replaced anyway, and I could have moved the left to the right when it was on the lift like I did yesterday, and just seeing, okay, now I moved the left to the right, my right side is now working. I know the sensor fixed the right side, so I know when I get my new sensor, it's gonna be good on the right side. But like I said, I didn't do any of that. I went with, okay, it needs a sensor, I put one in, and it ended up bringing me through like a 2-hour kind of roundabout. But if it was a customer car, you know, that's 2 hours that you cannot bill your customer. You cannot bill your customer because you got a replacement part that was bad. You can't bill your customer because you kind of leapfrogged your diagnosis and now you're not sure if what you did was right, and now you can't retest what you already took apart to a certain degree because I had to break the sensor apart to get it out. So now I got to kind of start from scratch, retrace my steps, go through all this aggravation and stuff for something that I could have just kind of, if I would have been a little bit more to the book with my diagnosis originally, I probably would have saved that aggravation. I watch a lot of South Main Street Auto. Eric O, he's like probably one of the best I've seen for doing diagnostics. In all the years I've worked on cars, I've only worked with 1 or 2 guys that really would take it to the level that I think he takes it to with his diagnosis. I mean, this guy knows his stuff, and you know, he says test, don't guess. You know, don't fire off the parts cannon to shoot parts at it. And I'm just saying to anybody else out there that's doing this for a living, follow those advice. Follow that, whether you're working on your own stuff or you're working on somebody else's and you're getting paid. Follow that advice. Do it right. Do it the best you can. If you don't know, ask. YouTube, Google, you know, use whatever you have at your disposal if you don't know the answer to figure it out, and you'll save yourself a lot of trouble.